They told me I was never meant to inherit anything. Right there at the dinner table, surrounded by crystal glasses and fake smiles, my own father looked me in the eye and said, "You're not a real Monroe." That was the moment I knew. I didn't need their name to have power. I just needed the truth. Hi, I'm Rachel Monroe. The girl they tried to erase from the family legacy, but what they didn't know was that I held a secret that would unravel everything, a $20 million twist buried in a trust my grandmother left behind. You're not going to believe what happened next. Before we dive into the story, if you're enjoying these meaningful stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more. Now, let's start the story together. The smell of lavender and roasted duck still makes my stomach turn. That evening, it floated in the air like everything else at the Monroe spring tasting dinner. Carefully arranged, perfectly pleasant, and deeply artificial. I arrived right on time, not too early, not too late. The gravel crunched softly under my shoes as I walked toward the estate house. Candlelight shimmered through tall windows. Inside, laughter echoed, familiar but distant. The kind of laughter that happens in rooms full of people who know each other's secrets but pretend not to. Gregory sat at the head of the table, of course. My father, by law, not blood. His tie was navy, like always. Caroline was beside him, her pearl choker sitting just so above the neckline of her cream dress. She looked like she belonged in a commercial for old money. Derek was there too, sipping wine without meeting anyone's eyes. I took my seat 2 spots down from Gregory, linen napkins folded like cranes, crystal glasses already half full. For a brief moment, I let myself think maybe, just maybe, this night would be different. Maybe I had earned my place, Harvard, the nonprofit in Brooklyn, the vineyard I helped double yield at in Oregon. It had all led back here, hadn't it? So I leaned in a little, careful not to interrupt the flow of conversation, and asked softly, "Will I be considered for the estate?" Forks paused mid-air. Caroline's wine glass tilted, catching candlelight like a mirror. Gregory set his napkin down with the same slow precision he used when pruning vines. "You were never meant to inherit this," he said, just like that. The words didn't hit all at once. At first, they floated, elegant, sterile. Then they landed, heavy. I caught my breath before anyone noticed. Caroline didn't even try to hide her smirk. Derek shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. No one did. Gregory added in that calm, clipped tone of his, "You should be grateful we raised you at all. You're not a real Monroe." The room didn't erupt. There were no raised voices, just the clink of a spoon against porcelain. That's how betrayal works in families like mine, quietly, efficiently. I looked at the candle in front of me, let its flame steady my pulse. I didn't argue, didn't cry. Instead, I smiled, just enough to be polite, and thought, all right, let's begin. It had been 2 days since the dinner. I hadn't unpacked. I hadn't made coffee. I hadn't even turned on the lights in the living room. The apartment felt like a waiting room, half-filled boxes, shoes by the door still damp from California rain, and my coat still hanging on the kitchen chair. Outside, New York sulked under a soft spring rain. It wasn't stormy, just steady, as if the sky didn't feel like raising its voice either. I was nursing a lukewarm cup of tea when the buzz from downstairs startled me. A courier, the voice said. No return address, just a delivery from someone named Helen Monroe. I met him at the door. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and tied with a navy ribbon. My name, written in familiar cursive, curved like a whisper across the front. I stood there for a while, holding it. Helen, my grandmother. The only Monroe who ever looked me in the eye and didn't search for someone else behind my face. She used to sit in the garden with her coffee saying, "They don't see you yet, but one day they will." I took the letter to the kitchen table, set it down beside the cup of tea, and slowly undid the ribbon. The first page held my name, not as a courtesy, not as a witness, as the sole executor of the Helen Monroe Family Trust. 51% of everything, the vineyard, the land, the event space, the foundation. My fingers trembled, but not from fear, from something steadier, sharper, clarity. I flipped through the rest. Signatures, notarizations, all filed months ago, legal, binding, untouched by Gregory's hand. It was all mine, not because they gave it, because she did, quietly, thoroughly, irrevocably. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I just sat there for a long while, listening to the rain thread against the windows like soft applause. The phone on the table buzzed with a message from my old nonprofit colleague. Just a note. Miss seeing you around. Hope you're doing good work. For a moment, I thought about sending back a reply. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder I'd been too hurt to touch for months, Monroe Holdings. Then I called Mr. Wilkes. He answered on the second ring. His voice was low and deliberate, like he'd been waiting for this call. Yes, Ms. Monroe, everything is in place. Your grandmother was very clear. I thanked him, hung up, and sat back. I thought about Gregory's voice at dinner, cold and final, about Caroline's smirk, about how quiet Derek had been, and how no one, not a single soul, had questioned what I was owed. The thing about silence is, it can sound like acceptance, but sometimes it's strategy. I reached for Helen's final note tucked behind the trust documents. The handwriting wobbled slightly at the edges, but her words were clear. They never saw you, darling, but I always did. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and stared at the storm outside. Then I picked up the phone. Some people fight back with anger. I fight back with paperwork. The morning after the call with Mr. Wilkes, I opened my laptop and logged into the Monroe Holdings portal. I'd been avoiding it for months. But this time, I wasn't just an outsider looking in. I had the keys, all of them. The interface was slick, too slick. Years of marketing polish to hide the rot underneath. Caroline had turned the family name into a brand, all smooth curves and curated elegance. But I knew enough about nonprofit finance to spot what others missed. Numbers that didn't align, transfers that circled too long, budgets that bloomed in the wrong season. I didn't scream. I highlighted. I flagged. I forwarded. Within 48 hours, I had a small legal team reviewing every line of charitable disbursements tied to the Monroe Foundation. Forensic auditors, former colleagues from a project in Oregon, joined without hesitation. The trust gave me full oversight. No one could stop the request. They didn't even know I'd made it. Then came the first win. A routine vendor review flagged a payment trail connected to a vineyard restoration firm in Napa. Except the address was a P.O. box, and the firm didn't exist. I stared at the name on the transfer. Caroline's signature. That afternoon, I opened Instagram on a whim. I hadn't checked it since the dinner. There she was, Caroline posing on the terrace overlooking the estate vineyard, a glass of rosé in hand, heels too sharp for soil. Caption, Big Deal Brewing? Next Gen Estate. I didn't feel rage, I felt alignment. The next morning, I submitted a formal injunction to the zoning board overseeing the Monroe Estate's proposed expansion. As executor of the trust, I had the legal right, and more importantly, the responsibility, to pause all projects pending a financial integrity review. I kept the language professional, calm, nothing accusatory, just concern, red flags, a request for pause. By the end of the week, the county planning office issued a freeze on permits. Local press whispered about administrative delays. Private emails surfaced from investors asking for clarity. No one got answers. Inside the estate, they chalked it up to bureaucracy. Gregory, no doubt, called in favors. Derek probably cursed under his breath while scanning contracts. Caroline? She posted brunch photos from a rooftop in Napa. No one looked beneath the surface. That's how I wanted it. The thing about quiet rebellion is that people don't see it coming until the ground shifts under their feet, and by then, it's too late to steady themselves. I looked over the list of frozen accounts, paused deals, halted payments. Their wings hadn't been clipped. They'd been folded slowly, neatly, by their own blind hands. And I wasn't ready to tell them just yet. They called it an urgent family meeting. I called it Thursday. The message came from Gregory's assistant, polite, formal, and unmistakably mandatory. Attendance expected, boardroom, noon sharp. I didn't reply. I didn't ask who else would be there. I simply packed one folder into my bag and boarded a morning flight. Black slacks, black blouse, low heels, hair tied back. Minimal, controlled, surgical. The Monroe boardroom hadn't changed. Dark walnut table, 12 chairs arranged like a jury, and oil portraits of men who'd never smiled down from the walls. A breeze wandered in through the open windows, but it didn't move the tension. Gregory was already there, pacing in a circle too tight to be casual. Caroline sat with her arms crossed, tapping one acrylic nail against her phone. Derek stood near the bookshelf, pretending to read the spine of an outdated ledger. When I entered, the room stilled. "Glad you decided to join us," Gregory said, his tone too smooth to be honest. "The estate's under attack." I placed my folder on the table and took the empty seat directly across from him. "No," I said quietly. "The estate's under review. There's a difference." Caroline let out a sharp breath. "You've been leaking things, stirring up nonsense. Do you even understand what you're risking?" I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. This is the will, the real one, signed and sealed by Helen Monroe. You might remember her. She was the one who actually built this foundation. Derek shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward Gregory, who didn't flinch. I placed the second document on top of the first. This is the trust. I'm the sole executor. I control 51% of Monroe Holdings. That includes the land, the event space, the brand, and the foundation. Gregory narrowed his eyes. That's not possible. I reached for the third sheet. And this is a breakdown of financial irregularities discovered in the last 6 weeks. Funds transferred to shell organizations, zoning documents with falsified approvals, donations rerouted into ghost nonprofits. Caroline stood up. "You're bluffing." I looked at her, not with anger, but with clarity. "Caroline, you signed half of them." There was a snap beneath the table. Her bracelet had broken. Beads scattered across the marble floor. Gregory's voice finally cracked. "We took you in. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us?" I met his stare. "You gave me a seat at dinner. Helen gave me the house." Derek spoke for the first time. "This could ruin us." I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I simply said, "This isn't revenge. It's realignment. You wrote the first draft of this family. I'm just revising it, legally." Silence followed, not the awkward kind, the irreversible kind. No one moved. The breeze returned, lifting the corner of one page on the table. I gathered the documents slowly, slid them back into the folder, and stood. "I don't need your blessing. I already have your signatures." Gregory opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. I stepped toward the door, steady, not hurried. At the threshold, I paused. Not for drama, but because it felt right to mark the moment. I watched their world fold, page by page, and I hadn't even raised my voice. It started with a whisper. Then came the headline: Estate Fraud. Monroe Foundation under federal scrutiny. The story broke on a local blog and caught fire before breakfast. By noon, it had made its way to the homepage of Wine and Soil Weekly. By the weekend, it was being dissected on morning radio, from respected legacy to cautionary tale. I didn't speak to reporters. I didn't sit down for interviews or offer statements. The spotlight was something I'd never wanted. Helen used to say, "The land doesn't care who gets the credit. It just needs someone to care for it." So I worked. The Monroe jet was the first to go. Then the fleet of vintage cars. Then the Palm Springs villa that had sat empty since 2018. All sold off quietly, legally, every dollar traced and reassigned. I reopened the books on the foundation from scratch. cutting the ceremonial fluff and redirecting every grant line toward things that actually mattered. Tuition support for local agricultural students, heat safety equipment for vineyard workers, small sustainability grants for minority-owned wineries. The land didn't need another ribbon cutting, it needed stewardship. By mid-July, my name wasn't trending. My work was. Anonymous letters arrived from past employees who thanked me for doing what no one else dared. A small envelope came from a former board member. Inside was a pin Helen used to wear. "She'd want you to have this," the note said. I didn't cry, but I held it for a long time. Caroline disappeared from social media. Derek resigned from 3 advisory boards. Gregory's face was removed from the town's welcome mural without ceremony. When the IRS and the state audit boards came knocking, there were no angry protests, just silence. People assumed I was celebrating. I wasn't. I was clearing wreckage. My apartment in Brooklyn became command central. Spreadsheets, donor calls, legal filings, a whiteboard with names of local nonprofits I wanted to partner with. No press releases, no gala dinners, just slow, honest work. One afternoon in August, a colleague from my old nonprofit days texted me. "Saw your name in Wine and Soil. You're doing real work again." I smiled and kept typing. The feature read, "From Heiress to Steward, How Rachel Monroe is Restoring More Than Land." I thought about what Helen would say. Probably something quiet, something dry, something true, like, "Told you." Outside my window, the sky was heavy with late summer haze, the kind of heat that made things look soft at the edges. But the view was clear, and the soil beneath it, real, flawed, complicated, was mine now. Not because I inherited it, but because I chose to plant something in it. I didn't need their name anymore. I'd already planted something better. The message was short. Just one line. "Could we talk?" "The bench. If you're willing." I didn't respond right away. I let it sit for a day, then another. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Clarity, maybe. Or just the quiet to catch up with me. The garden looked the same and yet different when I arrived. Late October had painted everything in amber and rust. The roses had dropped most of their petals. The air smelled faintly of wet soil and memory. Gregory was already there. He was hunched forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. In his hands, he held Helen's old ceramic mug. I recognized the faint crack along the rim. She used to sip her coffee from it every morning like it was the only thing worth savoring before the day began. Now it was empty, cold, like him in a way. He didn't look up when I approached, just said, "I didn't know how far it had gone." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He turned slightly toward me, his face thinner than I remembered, skin a shade paler than usual. Even his voice had lost its edge. "I let things rot," he said. "I know that now." The wind moved through the trees behind us. Leaves skipped across the stone path like they couldn't bear to settle. Finally, he asked, "Did you ever hate me?" I stood there a long moment, then sat beside him, not close, just near enough to hear my own breath. "No," I said quietly. "I just finally loved myself more." He exhaled slowly, maybe relief, maybe disappointment, or maybe he'd expected something else entirely. I didn't ask. He didn't apologize, and I didn't demand it. Some things aren't meant to be repaired, only released. After a while, I stood. I rested my hand lightly on the bench, just the bench, not him, and let my fingers linger on the worn wood. It felt warm from the sun, familiar, like Helen was still somewhere in the air. "I wish you peace," I said, "but I won't carry this anymore." I turned and walked back toward the path. Behind me, the Monroe land stretched wide and quiet. No headlines, no whispers, just soil and sky. And for the first time, it felt like mine, not because of blood, but because of choice. As I walked away from that garden bench, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt light, not because anything had been fixed, but because I'd finally stopped carrying what was never mine to hold. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from mending broken ties. It comes from choosing peace over permission. In life, we don't always get the love we deserved, but we can still build something honest from the hurt. And maybe, just maybe, letting go is the bravest way to begin again. If this story touched something in you, I'd be honored to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share, or simply sit with it a while. Some stories grow roots long after they end.